In Albuquerque, faith leaders and community members gathered this week to respond to the violent march organized by so-called alt-right groups in Charlottesville, Virginia. There's a lot to talk about in the local and national response to marches and rallies that promote hate. We'll continue to bring in different people to talk about what this means in New Mexico in the coming months. Producer Sarah Gustavus sat down this week with Richard Wood, professor of sociology at UNM and a founding director of the Southwest Institute on Religion, Culture, and Society, to get a broader view of faith-based organizing across the country and how faith groups are responding to current issues around race and equality.
Richard, thanks so much for stopping by this week.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Your past research includes interviewing faith leaders about their work. What are some common issues and common ground that you've found of leaders of different faiths around race and equity?
So the kind of organizations I study around the country and in New Mexico work across racial ethnic lines, work with immigrants, work with all kinds of different groups, but also work across different faith traditions. So these are evangelical Christians, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, whole bunch of faith traditions. And I think the real common ground is deep passion, really care about what's happening in the country right now, the divisions and the polarization, but also how hard it is for Americans to really talk and work together across racial lines sometimes. And what I look at is the way that religious commitment, people's faith, people's spirituality, helps them find common ground in order to work together across those really difficult lines of race sometimes.
It gives them a place to start, but it's still really challenging work.
It's still really challenging work, and I think that has to do with, we thought we'd solved the racism problem in this country with the civil rights movement, and I think what we're discovering is how deeply American culture has made whiteness a way of dividing people. So it's not something wrong with white people, it's the way we've constructed whiteness so that we use whiteness to divide poor and middle class white folks from poor and middle class African Americans and Latinos and American Indians and Asian Pacific Islanders, instead of those folks coming together to build a better America. And part of the current moment is coming to terms with whiteness in America, I think.
And so do you think faith leaders are uniquely positioned to start that conversation in a way that politicians or other groups can't?
Uniquely might be too strong in that there's some really great secular groups doing work like this as well. But yeah, specially positioned to do this because of the way that shared faith commitments, even when they're different traditions, most of the traditions say, and yet we worship the same God. And that does help people come together. And sometimes it helps them find the courage to take on hard issues and confront the difficulties we face as a society.
Do you see these movements changing over time? Is there something unique about 2017, different about this year?
So I see the movements changing, and I think 2017 is different. It's not that the real strong white supremacy movement is new. That's been buried in American culture, sometimes deep underground, sometimes very prominent, all through our history. What's new is those movements can claim, and I want to say this carefully, can claim an ally in the White House right now. And they do claim that. And the burden's on the president to distance himself from that. And when he has refused to distance himself from that, that's created this perception that white supremacy is okay. And that's created a whole lot of passion and anger and fear among the kind of people I study. But it's also created a lot of interest in coming together. So that's new. The other piece I think that's new is a recognition that you can't deal with poverty in America unless you help people come to terms not just with racism, but with whiteness and white identity, as well as black identity and Latino identity. That there's something about the way whiteness has been used that gets in the way of all Americans coming together. And we're discovering we've got to come to terms with that. And it's a hard time, but it's also an enormously exciting time for me. If we get this right, I think American democracy has a whole more open future and a promising future than we've had in the past.
And of course, there's a very unique conversation here in New Mexico. We have a different history, different identities. What can you say about organizing around faith and these issues here in New Mexico right now?
So there's a lot of it going on, some of it very explicitly faith-based. In southern New Mexico, a group called New Mexico Café, Comunidades en Acción por la Fe, communities in action for their faith, working together with immigrants and and citizens working together with Hispanics and African Americans and whites and American Indians, really bringing people together across those lines. In Albuquerque, a group called Albuquerque Interfaith, the Southwest Organizing Project, Olé, Red Nation, there's a whole bunch of different groups working to do this kind of service to American society, bring New Mexicans together across these lines. And I want to emphasize, that's not bringing just African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans together. Lots of white folks engaged in this. White folks committed to constructing a broader, more inclusive sense of what it means to be Nuevo Mexicano, what it means to be American. It's an exciting time.
And so what do you think we should be thinking about right now? We want to have lots of folks on the show in the coming months to talk about these issues. What would you leave us with as some ideas of things to be thinking about?
So I would encourage folks out there to be thinking about, what does their faith, if they're people of faith, how does their faith ask them to step into this moment with some courage, with some willingness to talk to people who aren't like them? I would encourage folks to pay attention to what's going on in their congregations and in some of those organizations I just mentioned. And there was a brand new event this week in Albuquerque. A group called the Poor People's Campaign came to Albuquerque, packed a big church in town to talk about how we can come together and address the polarization, come together and really embrace each other in some new ways and change the direction of the country. And I think that's a good thing to pay attention to.
Richard Wood, thank you so much for getting us started here. Hope to have you back again to talk more about these issues.
Great to be part of the show, and thanks for having me.